Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Ukraine was historic not only because he became the first Prime Minister of India to visit Ukraine, but also for the reason that he ventured into a territory not many world leaders have done. That territory of the essentiality of bringing peace between Russia and Ukraine through diplomacy and dialogue rather than force. That he did not take any peace proposal with him, but instead asked both sides to sit together and resolve their differences and offered all help as a friend added to the moment. His statement that India was never neutral in the war but always on the side of peace will resonate across the people in times to come. In order to decode President Zelensky and the Ukrainian establishment's reaction to the Prime Minister's visit, we have with us today former Foreign Secretary Sri Kamal Sibal. So let us join Sri Kamal Sibal for decoding of this visit. Namaskar and welcome to Samvad at Mayank, sir. Sir, I was going through the communication issued by President Zelensky on his Telegram channel after his meeting with Prime Minister Modi. And I'll quote him before I come to the question part. He says, quote, "The issue of ending the war and a just peace is a priority for Ukraine. Today, one of the topics of our meeting with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the peace summit itself. How we can move forward in that direction. We very much expect that India will be able to join the joint communique of the inaugural summit." Now, I just wanted you to decode this statement, sir. First, what is just peace? And why is Zelensky imposing this condition of India joining the joint communique of the inaugural summit?
Well, I think he lacks an understanding of how diplomacy functions and how we should deal with a country like India. He can't lay conditions of the kind that that you have mentioned. That is, India should join the communique that was issued in Burgenstock at that so-called peace summit in Switzerland. Does he think that he can pressure India, force India, bully India, intimidate India to sign that before India can have any thinking or views on how a peace settlement in Ukraine can be advanced? In other words, he is disowning the grand effort the Prime Minister made of 10 hours train journey from the Polish border to Kiev and 10-hour journey back in order to talk about peaceful ways of resolving this conflict. He's basically saying that unless you sign on the dotted line of what was agreed in Switzerland, in which Russia was not present, then really speaking, you are not in a position to promote just peace in Ukraine. So the just peace is based on what the Ukrainian view is, what Zelensky's 10-point peace plan includes in terms of the way forward. Now, I don't understand once India at a formal level with our secretary present at that meeting said that they were not joining the communique and explained why. And basically because both the sides to the conflict have to be represented any peace meeting. And you cannot have only one side deciding on what should be the course forward and then present to the other side a kind of ultimatum, if you like, in inverted commas, that this is how the rest of the world, which includes India, if he had gone ahead and joined the communique, sees the way forward. This is not acceptable to us. Now, if you know that, if you recall that when our foreign minister was giving a press briefing in Ukraine itself, he distanced himself from this line of thinking, saying, yes, this is one view, but there are other views on how the peace process can move forward. And it's not only India that did not join the consensus, other countries too. And then he read out a passage from the joint communique, joint statement, which reflected our views on the subject, to the effect that we should think of innovative ways of promoting a peaceful solution to the Ukraine conflict. In other words, we are not buying the parameters of the Ukrainian side on how the peace process can move forward. So for him to, after our prime ministers reiterate on the Telegram channel something which you quoted and I didn't know, to my mind it is it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. He should be more mature. He should try and win over India rather than trying to, how should I say, force India to accept his point of view. What are the means in his at his disposal to force India in any way? In any way. So he's, in fact, in a way, how should I say, making India's efforts to find some kind of a viable solution which takes the interests of both sides into account, and this is what we say, making our effort in that direction difficult, and not accepting that India can be a legitimate part of the process of promoting dialogue and diplomacy in Ukraine unless we accept what Ukraine's view is on how we should move forward.
Sir, on the other hand, what I noticed was this very mature approach by Prime Minister and the Indian establishment, I would say, that we went there without any preconceived notions and without any agenda. And there was no so-called peace plan which other nations bring. It was an open sort of a forum where Prime Minister, he said, and I'm quoting him again, that the road to resolution can only be found through dialogue and diplomacy. And we should move in that direction without wasting any times. Both sides should sit together to find a way out of this crisis. I want to assure you that India is ready to play an active role in any efforts towards peace. If I can play friends, I'm sorry, I misquoted him. If I can play any role in this personally, I will do that. I want to assure you as a friend, unquote. Now, I found this very mature, sir, but both sides have taken maximalist positions. Russia and Ukraine both have their own agendas, their own issues, their own historical legacy. But with these agendas, what is the possibility you see of any diplomatic breakthrough?
Well, the diplomatic breakthrough will come if the United States and Europe, who are fighting a proxy war through Ukraine with Russia, find that their existing policy is not going to achieve what they hoped and intended to achieve. And the cost of the war is increasing for all sides, including Ukraine, but also Europe in particular, and to some extent the United States, but not too much, because the United States is far away, and in fact it has profited a lot from this conflict in terms of providing alternative sources of energy to Europe, and also by the weakening of the European economy, especially the German economy. The competition, economic competition between Europe and United States has moved in favor of the United States. But at the end of the day, my own view is that if the West wants to maintain its so-called hegemony over global affairs, because at the end of the day, this is what it is. Even if they know that the world situation is changing and power is shifting away, both economic and political power, to other parts of the world, they don't want to give up easily their preeminent position. So their entire diplomacy is axed on maintaining that preeminent position, or if it cannot be preeminent, at least the process should be prolonged as long as possible. And in the meantime, they will see if through technology and some other means they can maintain their edge over others. So, therefore, unless they realize that this is costing them, the West that is, and Ukraine itself, a great deal in terms of loss of human lives, disruption of trade, the impact of this conflict on the global situation, the mounting resentment in the West, in the global South, that peace is not being promoted when the rest of the world is suffering and the international system is virtually breaking down. So unless they come to the conclusion, there is time to step back and roll back. Now, the problem there is that in the United States, they can't do it. They are in an election mode. And it is very, very difficult, impossible for them to acknowledge that the policy they have pursued for the last 2.5 years or whatever it is has failed. And after saying that they're going to defeat Russia strategically, militarily weaken it, cause its economy to collapse, and hopefully there might be a regime change. Now to admit that all those goals have not been achieved, on the contrary, to accept that they need to step back. Now this will have tremendous repercussions for the politically for the Democratic Party going into elections. And there is actually no real president, functioning president at the moment, because Biden is a lame duck president. So the US, till the elections, till January next, cannot, when the new president comes to power, cannot take any decision which would find a route to de-escalation and peace. And Ukraine, with its hardline position, is not in a mood to publicly acknowledge that they are being exhausted and therefore need to look at peace. Because if they did that, then I think the Zelensky regime will have to go. Because they also can't say that, yes, we are willing to have a territorial compromise and this and that. There's a very hardline position that no territorial compromise. Constitutionally, but through an executive order, Zelensky has said there cannot be any negotiation with Russia so long as Putin is in power. And today I read somewhere that he's called him a sick old man in the Kremlin. Some very pejorative language he uses against Putin. So they're also debarred from, by executive order, to go into a negotiating mode directly with Russia. And changing that executive order would have serious political consequences on the ground for Zelensky himself. So their hands are also tied. Now his last-ditch effort to gain some ground in the Kursk region and use that as a bargaining lever, to my mind, is not a realistic strategy, because at the end of the day, the Russians will find a way to push them out of Russian territory, because for them it's extremely important not to accept that they can tolerate in any way the first time that Russian territory has been directly invaded by land by a foreign power since Nazi Germany invaded Russia. For them, symbolically, this is extremely important. So the outlook is not very good, but Prime Minister tried his best in terms of sharing his thinking and views and giving some impetus to the peace process, not only as India, but as a voice of the global South, to convey to Zelensky that just as he told President Putin that you cannot have a solution on the battlefield, to tell Ukraine also, especially after their Kursk adventure, that you can't find a solution on the battlefield either. And therefore, you have to look at ways to enter into some sort of a peace dialogue, and that India is willing to help to the extent that India can, and India's support is needed. The Prime Minister said he's available. But from what our friend has said on the Telegram channel and what he said to the press, to the Indian press in Kiev itself, he's not making it easy at all for India and for others to counsel peace and to persuade Ukraine to find some route to mobilize support, genuine support for a peace process in which it would be willing to participate.
So rather than taking India's support to find an alternative route or some route to peace, at a news conference after the meeting, I'm quoting too many times today, but I think it's important, sir. President Zelensky, I'm quoting him, Putin and his society will feel the pain of war if India stops importing Russian oil. If we will change the Indian attitude to this war and Russia, we will stop the war because Putin will want to stop it. Unquote. Sir, Europe is contributing more to Russian economy through its import of gas. And Zelensky seems to be basically angling for the Indian purchase of crude oil. So, I mean, I really don't understand, is this, how appropriate is this behavior diplomatically?
It's childish. I mean, if it was a new issue, I can understand. If suddenly it erupted and there was no background to it, I can understand that he raised this issue. But this issue has been raised ever since they imposed sanctions on Russia and India started buying discounted oil. The Americans tried very hard, tried to intimidate us and caution us, but now they've stepped away. And not only stepped away, they're all very happy to buy refined Russian oil from Indian refineries. And in fact, the US ambassador here in Delhi, just see what he said. He said, in fact, we encouraged India to buy Russian oil so that the oil prices did not skyrocket. And they remained at a reasonable level. So they were taking credit for persuading India or advising India to buy Russian oil. And of course, as you rightly said, Europe is buying oil and gas and uranium and other metals from Russia and coal. So, I mean, this is childish diplomacy. I mean, he knows what the facts are. So why raise an issue on which India has given God knows how many times its view on the subject? At the level of our foreign minister, at the level of our petroleum minister, they've explained. And Jaishankar explained again in his press conference, Kiev itself. So repeating what we have said maybe 2-3 dozen times. So what is his point? This is childish.
Now, sir,
it is actually kind of a moral browbeating. Oh, you were the villain and you were buying so much oil from Russia and you're giving money to Russia to continue its war. I mean, why? He's trying to lecture us on some moral platform when they themselves, when Europe itself is, as I mentioned, buying so much from Russia.
So you have seen so many leaders across the world. I mean, with your vast experience, why would anybody do that, sir? I mean, psychologically, diplomatically, why would anybody?
He's a showman. He is a showman, and he's spoiled. He got so much attention from the rest of the world, including being on the cover of Vogue magazine, fashion magazines, addressing the US Congress. Also, he was part of the Eurovision contest. He's been invited to G7 meetings. We didn't invite him to the G20 meeting, but he came to a G20 meeting in Indonesia. The first cabinet meeting that the new UK Prime Minister held, Starmer, first cabinet meeting, he was invited to participate in it. All the leaders of your major leaders of Europe have gone there. So he's spoiled. And he thinks he's entitled to the support of the international community, and it's the only country in the world which has suffered aggression. Come on, the rest of the world knows what the reality of the world is and how guilty everybody is, including his own supporters, about invading other countries, changing regimes, killing civilians. After all, what is happening in Gaza today? Of the 40,000 people dead, God knows, my figure may be wrong, but 10,000 children have been killed. And who's supplying them all the weapons and giving them full political support? The same people who are supporting our friend Zelensky. So he still thinks he's on the stage and he's doing a TV show.
More of a comedy show, a tragic comedy show. Sir, I was going through the National Security Communication Advisor, John Kirby. He issued a statement after this meeting, which I'll quote once again. I'm sorry for so many quotes today, sir.
No,
I'm quoting him. When it comes to the Ukraine war, if there is another country out there that is willing to be helpful in terms of trying to end the war in Ukraine, we welcome that. But by being helpful, we mean it's got to include conversations with the Ukrainians. And it's got to start from an understanding of where President Zelensky is on this. We say it all the time, and it sounds like I'm slapping a bumper sticker to it, but I don't mean to. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, unquote. So we just saw the first peace summit in Switzerland without Russia. I'm trying to make sense out of it, sir. Maybe you can help me make sense out of it.
You know, this is a diplomatic ploy by the United States. And one can understand, you know, how they look at the world and how they look at their own diplomacy. They want to both support Zelensky and at the same time pretend that, you know, Zelensky has an agency of his own, an interest of his own. So we are there to support him. So whatever Zelensky wants, you know, should be given primacy. We are only supporting him. So it's not for us to take decisions on behalf of Zelensky or Ukraine. So this is a diplomatic cover that they are giving themselves when everybody knows that without support from the West, Zelensky regime will collapse overnight. But the stakes for the West are, from their point of view, are very high. And they have made the stakes even higher by all this rhetoric that if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, then Western democracies are threatened. I mean, they think that Russian troops will march right up to Portugal or something like that. So that is one. The other is an indirect message to us that if India is interested in promoting peace, then the starting point for India has to be what Ukraine wants. Now, this is never a successful diplomatic approach where you support only one side and disregard or not give similar weight to the thinking and viewpoint of the other side, especially if the other side is much stronger and has the upper hand. And when the other side says that they are willing to have a dialogue and a solution, but based on realities, not on Zelensky's 10-point peace plan. So this is a way of also telling India that indirect way that not that they said it openly, but you can interpret it that way, supporting Zelensky's demand that we should become part of the communique that was issued in the first peace process, because that's what Ukraine wants.
The conditions are not leading Europe or the world anywhere, sir. I mean, the whole of Europe is at war itself. And one final question before we wind up, sir. I mean, I travel a bit to Russia because Putin started with this contention of the expansion of NATO up to his borders through Ukraine. But since the war has started, sir, Sweden has joined NATO, Finland has joined NATO. So the NATOification of Europe continues. So will this ever end? I mean, this conflict between Russia as the major power or the NATOification of Europe, will this ever end?
Well, there are still some candidates for joining NATO. So it's not as if the process has ended. There is Moldova, which is, I think, a candidate for NATO. There's some Balkan. I don't know if there are any Balkan countries left which want to join NATO. See, NATO has got itself into a big fix either, because they have this position that the NATO expansion is open-ended, and that any country that wants to join NATO should have the sovereign right to do so. And this open door policy of NATO will continue, which means that, and if you notice that even with regard to Ukraine, although for the moment the process of Ukraine joining NATO has been stalled, but in effect, in many ways, Ukraine is being NATOized, if I can use that phrase. And they still talk, and I think an agreement was signed with the United States and NATO and Ukraine end of last year, where this principle has been reiterated of Ukraine eventually joining NATO. It's very, very difficult to see how this will end, because Russia has made its position clear. After all, they have taken a tremendous risk in this military operation against Ukraine, which hasn't gone down, which hasn't gone off too well. And Russia has serious problems in the Black Sea. They've had to withdraw their naval units away even from Sevastopol. They're not able to stop, as they had intended, the flow of grain from. Well, they had an agreement that grain can flow, but Russia would have the right to inspect the ships so that no arms gun running was being done through these commercial grain shippings. But that thing has ended because Russia doesn't have the capacity. Some of their biggest naval vessels have been sunk. The Crimea is under attack. The NATO has given long-range weapons to Ukraine and said quite openly that they can use them anywhere they want, which is inflicting damage on Russia, on its refineries, drone attacks, everything else. So it's not as if for Russia it has been a walkover. But from Russia's point of view, if they do not stand firm now and use military means to stop the integration of NATO, of Ukraine into NATO, down the line it will become even more difficult when Ukraine's capacities are beefed up more and more by United States and Europe without Ukraine formally joining NATO. Then Russia will be presented a fait accompli, which it'll find very difficult to reverse. So whatever the calculations on the Russian side, they've taken a big risk with costs. So they're not going to step back. They're willing to have, as they say, a solution which is based on Russia retaining the territories, Russian-speaking territories in the Donbass area, with a guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, but Ukraine will receive any kind of guarantee that it wants from other parts, including Russia, about its future security. Now, whether that will be the end result of what is going on at present remains to be seen.
Sir, I would like to conclude on that note because we have been able to decode a lot of things after what I consider was a historic visit by Prime Minister Modi, not for the reason that he became the first Prime Minister to go to Ukraine, but for the courage and the maturity shown in perhaps becoming the first proper world leader to encroach into territory which people were generally avoiding, the Russia-Ukraine war. Thank you so much, sir. We'll keep coming back to you. Thank you so much, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar.